Looks like my boy SAS got invited to the PUP, but he ain't up against the Poppy. He's up against a beast. Dry Arabia, baby. Let's go. I feel like everyone's just busy doing everything but Dry Arabia, but here we are. Beastie playing as the Ottomans and SAS coming in on the HRE. Actually, that feels so fitting. To me, SAS is just kind of an HRE main. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but I feel like I do frequently see him picking the Civ. It's definitely got to be like his top 3 most played. I think French would be the other one that comes to mind for him that I've seen a lot of in the past. But let's see what he can do with the HRE. A Civ that can usually boom up pretty effectively. In fact, last time we watched Ottoman's HRE specifically, I think it was the first game we saw on the PUP between the Muslim and I can't remember the other person. Apologies, though. I think it's Edinov. And in that game, it ended up being a resounding win for the HRE. Let's see if we can go the other way this time. Now, remember, for those that are unaware, WNTDSAS is the guy that I believe has been in the top 100 on multiple occasions. He's a capable dude. We've seen him around the community. I think he still streams from time to time. Has a nice little community there. Beastie, of course. I don't know if you heard of this guy. I mean, so he used to be a big deal in StarCraft. You know, he's a little bit retirement homey these days. You know, he doesn't click as fast as he used to. If you needed any proof of that, just go watch how much he does in his Elden Ring run. But the community likes him, you know? He's got a few fans. Okay, I'm underselling him. Of course, Beastie, one of the most notable names in the AO4 scene. Hard on the grind, trying to get the games in while he can. Feeling a little bit ill at the moment. I hope you feel better soon, bud. But whipping out the Ottomans. And the Ottomans, to me, I think I said when the PUP first came out, the Ottomans, to me, look like a Civ that are more sophisticated than the Malians. And if you can learn to use that sophistication, if you can learn to like optimize around that complexity, they will be a broken Civ. Malians are a little bit more cut and dry in where they look broken. You know, passive gold into passive food, into escalation with raw units that are very effective. Poison, as the game goes on, is very useful. The Sofa units are incredible. The thing with the Ottomans is I think base layout optimization is crucial to success. If you don't get that right, everything else falls apart. But if you do, you set yourself up for an incredibly powerful mid-game timing. I think actually the answer to the Ottomans might be Civs that can utilize the early game very well or completely boom out of control into late. Well, good thing for SAS fans that he's got one of those Civs that ticks one of those boxes. It ticks the latter one. HRE, definitely a Civ that can quickly arrive in a late game state and play from a position of power, especially if their opponent allows for it. And one of the issues that you have with the Ottomans is if you're relying on the passive generation, your opponent can actually reach that timing. Because passive generation of units does pay off over time, but time is the key detail there. Early on, your military schools aren't going to be pushing out units frequently. And while over time it will lead to a beneficial advantage, it's not quick. That's why I also think that Delhi are going to be another solid Civ matchup against this specific Civ. In fact, by the way, just let me... There we go. Oh, doesn't that feel good? Wait, there was another button. Oh, you can hide that as well? Look at that, guys. You guys don't need to know about text. It's pollution. Wait, I actually kind of like it like that. Huh. That's low-key kind of sexy, right? Sleek. You know, bikini line done. Yes, just notice that. We did have BC and SAS on the wrong side there. I knew that was going to make people mauled. I'm glad I found that shortcut, because last time we had that problem, my solution was doing this. And when I done this, a bunch of people realized there was wood here they never knew about before. But they even got barrels of beer? Definitely beer. So all that beer is for when the HRE player can't get out of his base and he can't go anywhere, so his villagers just go inside and get drunk. There you go. Details you didn't know about the Germans. Speaking of the Germans, there's one thing they love is an Ahn. Hits them right in the good feels for the gathering rates, especially this type of generation covering the stone, gold, and food. Interesting, actually, that I don't think he's covering the wood, but this might be by design. I think there has been kind of a switcheroo a little bit for the HRE. We've seen more players going towards the stone on the PUP. Wonder if that's going to happen here for a multi-TC play. Kind of feels like actually HRE players are switching their timing to be more about a slightly delayed castle where they're stronger, and then they try to end the game there instead of Imperial booming up. Let's see if it works out for him. On the other side, of course, BC is going to be opening up the stables. That only cost 100 wood. Why? It's pretty nuts, actually. So for those who don't know, the big differences for this Civ, there are many, but like one of the big but subtle differences for the Ottomans is that all their production buildings cost 33% less than other Civs. Your stables cost 100 wood. Racks the same. Archer range is the same. Even siege workshops only cost 210 wood instead of the 300 they normally would. It's a very big deal, actually, because in the early game, when you've got very low amounts of wood to begin with, it allows you to kind of build more flexibly than other Civs would. It allows you to actually go in for a stables immediately after a tech up and then push out initial horsemen. And you might be in a situation where you didn't really have many people working on the wood. Now, of course, that's not the case here for Beastie because he's going for a multi-TC play. But it kind of shines a light on the flexibility the Civ has. In fact, in the early days of the PUP, what we were seeing people frequently do is instantly drop a racks, build 4 or 5 spearmen, and rush across the field. Not like a Mongol player to build an outpost, but more like just pressure point to keep your opponent off their gold. Looks like attempts are being made to keep SAS off his resources, but credit where credit is due. He opened up with the racks. I like this. He didn't play the full greedy HRE. He understood up against the Ottomans. They are going to have free eco to throw around, or rather free military units to throw around. And well, well, well. Look at this. Beastie being ambitious with the TC placement. It gets scouted out straight away by SAS, so he now knows. And he's going to try to pepper down the deer before they spread out. Unable to do so, though. Oh, maybe a missed opportunity there. SAS, I think he needed to snipe the further off deer first to ensure it. Alternatively, he could have ran in the center. The reason why SAS didn't run to the center of this deer stack is he would have pushed all the deer away anyway if he'd done that. But unfortunate for him, didn't get a chance to idle up the villagers over here. Meanwhile, speaking of villagers elsewhere, Spahi did sneak in. He just saw how quickly they were able to blitz one villager. Spearmen were baited away. Actually, nice play there. It looks like Beastie peeled one of the spearmen off with the scout and then went in with the Spahi. SAS will at least begin to wall himself in somewhat to mitigate some of the access points of his opponent. The spearmen, a little bit too slow to move across for SAS. Now, this is one big change with the town centers. They increased the build speed. As you can see, it takes a very long time now. So there was an opportunity for SAS to kind of pounce on this if he had the right units and in the right place. He didn't. He had spears. They're very slow. They're not very high damage units. It was unlikely he was ever going to be able to intercept this. But he just wanted to try and essentially draw pressure away from his base so he could create this play. Secondary TC now going up for the HRE. I think I like this approach for the HRE, even after the nerfs to the TCs. Playing a little bit prolonged feudal isn't too bad. You know, rushing castles less desirable now ever since they nerfed relics. Those unaware, relics no longer give 100 gold per minute. Only give 80 gold, which is a pretty big cripple to the HRE. I think the logic behind this multi-TC build now is you secure more food resource areas or more wood to get into farms, and that allows you to then consider Burgrave. And if you do go Burgrave, when you arrive in that castle age, because of your inflated eco count compared to the old builds, you can keep the men-at-arms spam up indefinitely compared to the older iteration where if you Burgrave rush, you can maybe get to 25 to 30 men-at-arms before you exhaust your food deposits, at which stage you've either got a very strong point in the game and more or less won it, or you start to lose slowly or quickly, depending on the matchup. Spearman at least going on the aggress. Nice pull by Beastie again. He keeps doing this intentionally. The aggro comes out on him and he pulls away from the base. And SAS, man, he should have sniffed this out. But it's so easy to kind of get tunnel vision. Like, you just want to keep these units away from your base. You're the HRE. Your economy is meant to be the best of the best. They've ever been the best. But what you're not doing is stopping Beastie from escalating his military district. Blacksmith's going down. Multiple military schools as well. So passive production is now underway. If you come across straight away, Beastie wouldn't have been able to get the blacksmiths up. The villagers would have had to have pulled away, and that would have delayed his passive generation. And remember, that's what the Ottomans are about. That's why I said the Delhi can be a very good counter to them, I think, is that the Delhi very quickly escalate, and they efficiently escalate by healing. Well, the Ottomans, they kind of have this other way of manipulating advantage. The Delhi are all about, I will heal up any unit, so, you know, I trade well. While the Ottomans are like, I will build these units for free, so I will trade well. But that takes time. And that timing means that for Ottoman players, they're usually aiming towards the 15-20 minute window, more often than not, to start taking control of the game. Delhi, by comparison, are more around the 15 minute. And then for the HRE, if you want to go for this prolonged feudal double TC play, there is an argument that you can exceed the Ottomans. But I think it comes down to whether you're able to pressure in the correct areas. So if you can't keep them on the defensive consistently with their military force, all that will happen is Beastie will eventually move out and spot you being in the wrong area. And that's why I like that SES, instead of going for kind of a half-assed approach here in Feudal, he's committing to Castle. This is much better. Now get the men-at-arms. That'll allow him to dive, and the Sipahi will be no match for this. And the problem with men-at-arms compared to the Spearman spam is you could argue that Beastie could go across the map and just try to trade out and snipe eco of the HRE instead, but he's going to do so at a slower pace. And he's also not going to be able to sustain himself underneath the TCs the same way the men-at-arms will. Beastie definitely doubling down this feudal. Might find himself a little bit surprised by SAS's build-up, especially considering it's 19 villagers to get him there. Beastie now has to make a choice. What does he do? Double down that feudal or find his way up to castle? He's going to have to make his choice fast, though. Because the Burgrave is ready to be operational. Interesting choice being made here by SAS. He's going to be able to ram back at home and slowly shuffle his way over to the Extension TC. Extension TC that's basically done with his resource bank, which is unfortunate for Beastie because he wanted more out of this. He wanted the boar as well. But he couldn't play boar straight away because SAS scouted this out, so he had to have it as a secondary option, which means he's probably going to be exposed when he goes for it. Speaking of boar, it looks like a similar play has been made by SAS. Man, I love this switch up out of him. I think the HRE are good for this kind of strategy. The only person I used to see do this outside of Pop was the Muslim, the multi-TC play, going with like an aggressively postured one on a boar or mid-map resource because it's a good setup point that can't easily be sieged down. But overall, the idea of multi-TC is nice because what it allows the HRE to do is offset these farm investments and go pocket eco. Pocket eco is usually something you can't do with the HRE because anytime you lose the villager, it's more like 1.4 villagers have been lost because of the Holy Inspiration. On top of that, the idle time just cripples your optimal timings in Castle and Imperial by so much, it's just not worth it. Men at arms. Woo. Body blocked off. SES jumped the gun. Gonna lose a few of the men at arms. Really getting ahead of himself here. He needed to wait until he's around 15 of these MAA to take the fight. But now, because he jumped the gun, Beastie maybe has an opportunity here. Continues to escalate. Does have the meta in the mix as well. And keep in mind that you are an HRE player playing up against an aura buff. Think of it similarly to the Delhi situation where, oh, these healers, I can't reach them. That's what happens here. Unless, of course, you're drunk with a meta and he just stands his ground. But apparently the MAA just can't commit long enough. And that means that attack speed aura is just going to go on indefinitely here. Oh, wait. Big surprise is right. You can't go for the ball with the Ottomans. I'm an idiot. Ignore me. Yeah, this play actually, this play feels less good, actually, overall, the TC. He could have played north side, but there wasn't much better. I guess this was just Beastie rather choosing the better of the worst two, because there wasn't like any high value deer stack. Apologies on that. Thank you, chat. Point me out. Autos do not like boar. And it's kind of weird how you have to switch your mind up like this, because the other thing is the almonds don't gather quicker on the berries, right? So you have to remind yourself. It used to be so easy to remember who can gather boar because it was basically whoever got better berries. Speaking of the autos, looks like they're going for a dive, but remember, they're lightly armored units. Sipahi, he's going to try to cut off a few of these villagers, but minimum damage done here, although the eco idling is a pretty big deal. And what is Beastie? Wait, what? Oh, this is interesting. So Beastie, he's trying to force the farm transition quicker out of SAS by taking away the pocket resources. It's very gambly what he's done here, but if you consider he's up against mass men-at-arms heading towards his base, it's pretty sneaky overall. It's not like it's going to get scouted out. And speaking of those men-at-arms, they finally arrived. And ow, do they hit hard. But have to pull back. BC was starting to extend a villager lead. It's going to be slowed down somewhat now. And that secondary TC now in trouble. The torches are ready to go. Meanwhile, north side. Looks like the Sipahi kept this opening. So they will be able to get away from the spears given pursuit. Now, once you consider there's Langsneck in the mix as well. In fact, needs to be careful. So it looks like the spears are cutting him off, so a few more Sipahi might be going down here. And arms, meanwhile, in the base of Beastie are going to torch the TC. Archer Army slowly trying to address the problem, but not really able to do so. So that is going to be a TC advantage now for SAS. One that he needs considering he's fallen behind in villager count. I love this. He moves north from the men-at-arms. Remember, BC needs more food. He hasn't made a farm transition yet. This is a brilliant read coming out from SAS. Well, feels like these Sapahi haven't really done any damage now. They've just been running around the base. The small groups have been kept busy, but the men-at-arms have still not been addressed yet by Beastie. Considering just massing the archers, you can see how much he delayed his own tech uptiming. Is finally going, though. A lot of people invested well. 27 people building into the Istanbul Imperial Palace. You can see what that's going to give him. Many more Vizier points now to work with, so he just wants to get access to those quick boom points. I wish I could show you them, but there is no option in the UI. Wondering what he's targeting. I think one of his big targets actually might be to get the advanced military schools so that he can build into the knights and janissaries. Speaking of the on-foot knights, these numbers are getting pretty bulky for SAS. Up to 22. Has got to resolve his food issue. Like, the boar's not going to last much longer. As soon as I say that, it's done. And he hasn't got many farms. This is a very dangerous point for SAS. Remember what we talked about with the Burgrave, of how you can't keep up indefinitely because you run out. But, oh, speaking of upsides, hello. That'll definitely help you out. SAS came here looking for eco, and instead he'll walk away with the eco lead as he butchers BC's peasants. Still blocks them out of the farm, of the deer rather, of gathering on the north side. Knights are also hitting the field, and because now SAS has mid-map control, notice that he can play deer. This once again sets back his farm timing, so keeps him in control of this game. People are right, though. You should definitely be able to gather food from dead things. Like, look at these men-at-arms right now. Just look at them. I mean, maybe you have to get a pickaxe out to get through the armor, but once you're through the armor, I mean, there's a lot of meat on that guy. Look at that. Okay, let's change away from cannibalism. Look at that horse. Look at that right there. You guys have had meat from oldies before. It's no different. There's a lot of meat on that horsey. Oh, a lot. Come on, give him one Sapai. Why do you get all the units for the new Civ? So that's going to be a product going down. Mid-map is really just looking completely lost to Beastie, though. I'm wondering what his transition point is now. He still hasn't set up farms yet. He's limited on food. And he's very reliant on Archer Ball. He needs to get into crossbows en masse. Now, of course, the one cool thing for the Ottomans, yeah, I haven't got much food access, but I can passively generate units. The bad news for the Ottomans is they're all located in one location. And if SAS remembers what the Ottomans do and targets down this blacksmith first, all this passive production just shuts down. But of course, that would be asking too much. Could you imagine if an HRE player didn't suffer from the same thing they always do? A lack of anti-range? This Archer crossbow ball is a problem. And it means SAS can't really dive too deep. He'll at least get through 2 of the military schools, but BC in the meantime could just replace them on the back foot and continue to build up. Honestly, I always find the HRE players end up in this kind of stuck in a rut situation around this point with this build. You're either strong enough that you've just shut down on all eco and you've won, or there's enough range to put together that you can't get in. And that's where the Burgrave kind of feels like a bait against this Civ. Because even if you shut down their eco, they still get military. You burn these military schools too late, and now you're feeling the pain of it. And the march away, several more troops are going to just be dropped. The turn around and fight, but it's just so difficult. The meta attack speed is just making this so effective of a fight for Beastie. Langstek going to move in for the clash, but only one of them in here just means a very easy wipe in favor of the Ottomans. Now, SAS at risk of beginning a Congo line of death. Looks like he's switching scripts hard on the stone, needs to get the keep up. I just don't know where you get this castle up safely. If you drop it in front of your base, you're going to die. Looks like he's shifting north side. Maybe secure the secondary deer area. His knights are now marching in here. Beastie was under fire, but he held strong. Shows you just how potent this passive generation is. I mean, it's actually insane to think of how this game switched scripts, and yet it was irrelevant for SAS. Passive generation for the Ottomans gets absurd around this point. 3 unit out of each of these buildings every minute is no joke, folks. Especially when you're being resource deprived on the map. This keep drop now coming out from SAS. It doesn't do anything. I really hope he's going to go deeper than this, because this keep, although it secures you some berries, it doesn't stop mid-map control from being with Beastie. I wonder, how many relics did SES actually end up with in the end? Wow, so SES only got 2. Oh yes, right there, I'm an idiot. I don't think it gets you back in this game. You need to find a way of probably denying the deer stack. You also just need to get Mangonel counters out. Like, actually, that's the biggest issue for SES right now. As is typical the HRE, even more so when they've moved towards these Burgrave builds. He doesn't have the eco to get siege. So this Archibald just continues to dictate every fight. And this is a really strong show from Beastie. A really strong show in the Ottomans. Just look at the army value right now. It's almost 4 times. Actually, it is over 4 times the value. What more can you say? Passive unit generation. And this is just with 2 still operable. But he's so big at this point, it doesn't matter. He's now going to reboom the TC back at home. Sets up 2 more military schools behind it all. And I mean, this is looking sliced and diced. The only upside right now for SAS is when BC dives like this, he can't kill buildings. The downside is everything else. SAS is at least staying alive off the north side, gathering on all the pocket ecos. The keep does somewhat block a move there by Beastie. But I don't think it blocks him in a way that's indefinite. If BC realizes that he's here, he'll just wrap around through the center. The only reason why this works right now for SAS is that BC doesn't know he's in this area. These villagers, oh my, so many of them dying. BC once again has the eco lead. And you can talk about Holy Inspiration all you want, but where is it active? Where are the prelates? How could you be HRE without prelates? He has a grand total of 2. So before anyone argues that the Holy Inspiration buff has put an HRE a mile ahead, I'm afraid it is not, folks. It's more accurate to do this and just check the numbers, because the income per minute isn't there. He's not getting the 40% inflated gathering rate. And maybe that's what this monastery is about, is addressing that, but missed window of opportunity to kind of like offset the issue here. Beastie is going to force a fight now. Horsemen are finally going to arrive. Meta is banging their drums, ready to bang your mum. Honestly, these psychopaths are so damn effective. 15% attack speed increase is just... In a ranged ball like this, it seems absurd. But realistically, the issue right now is that there is no counter in play. Mangonels have finally hit the field, but imagine if these had been here 2 minutes sooner. Well, by the time they arrive, BC's already getting into the counter. Keep drop coming in from SES is going to be a big fat fail. No chance in hell. Cancels it and tries to move away. Can't even get the passe walls up. BC only aware that that keep was there because he finally moved up for the berries, but at this stage, it's a whoop-de freaking doodah. You're in so deep, and you're so sizable in the eco that you can just switch into farms instead and play south side. Speaking of farms, SAS is finally fleshing it out. Walls are going down from both players now. They try to carve up the safe areas of the map. And oh, this is a bad exchange. A bad exchange for SAS. You just see that the Archibald is too big. They at least sniped the meta, but the price is going to be high. And credit to him, BC played that well. By playing on the edge of the gold vein, SAS couldn't fully engage with the horsemen. They were just clumbering over each other. Another bad trade for SAS. Just look at the destroyed value. BC taking over with almost 3.3k more killed, and army value is just getting absurd. So SAS can't really go knights. He's outmatched there. Also, Janissaries are now in play. I mean, you basically kind of need range yourself, which is a problem because HRE don't do ranged. I'm surprised I see Mangonels. Saw Mangonels, because they are just going to get picked apart. I'm kind of surprised SCS is hanging in on this. I'm wondering what his out is now in his mind. His keep drop failed. He hasn't looked for more stone gathering, so he's not going for an additional keep drop. And now with a defensive one here from BC, this is all going to be cleaned up. I mean, this is the beginning of the end. SAS, it was a good idea with the Burgrave. I like the way that he tried to play min-map into a rush into the base, and I can see the potential behind it. But I think one of the big issues when he dove is he didn't prioritize these military schools. Or rather, he prioritized the military schools instead of the blacksmiths. If he got rid of the blacksmiths, because of the increase in the production rates, getting rid of a blacksmiths is more effective than trying to torch down one of these military schools. And by the time he did arrive there, Beastie already had plenty of archers to defend with. And these archers, this is just absurd. They're not even retreating. They're just standing their ground against everything. Archers and crossbows to get the win. And once again, SAS is refusing to forfeit, but there is no way he gets Beastie out of his base anymore. Beastie, man. Is it just, yeah, it's just going to be prepping Janissaries now. So Janissaries basically kill everything that SES has before they can reach. Because now these archers and crossbows are still just a front line, and the Janissaries just stand behind them. Because the Janissaries are usually pretty vulnerable. Remember, this unit, it does get walloped pretty hard. Only 90 health, only does 50% of its damage against any unit but cavalry. And then, of course, you can see it receives additional damage from range damage. That's why it's good. It's good because there are no ranged units coming out from SES, rather. In fact, the only ranged unit SES is still built is Mangonel. And I'm not sure on this, but I'm going to go out on a whim and say that the Mangonel doesn't get bonus damage against the Janissaries. I'd have to test that. If it did, it would be insane, because that would mean it does bonus on bonus damage, because remember that Mangonels do bonus against ranged. I mean, maybe it... No. Maybe it does. I don't think it does because it doesn't have the range tag. For those wondering, like, whenever you're wondering about counters, just check the tags. So, where are his Janissaries right now? Are they on the march? I think they're just camping at home for the moment. So he's building up the next wave to try and kill the game. So Janissaries, it says it receives 50% range damage. So anything with a range tag, so like... well, defenses don't have range tags, but I'm pretty sure it's archers, crossbows, that type of stuff. Yes, just to clarify for people, no, I'm not talking about the cavalry damage. I'm talking about the range damage. So I should probably clarify this. Janissaries used to take bonus damage from cavalry. They don't anymore. That got fixed. So they counter cav, they don't take bonus damage in return, but they take extra damage from range units. I'm just curious if it means Mangonels as well. Okay, so apparently Mangonels don't get bonus damage as well. I think that makes sense. It should basically be... So for kind of simplicity to explain to people, Janissaries should only take bonus damage from something that has a range tag, i.e. archers, crossbows, and I think maybe other gunpowder units. Yes, agreed. Mangoes won't get the double bonus damage, which is reasonable. If that did happen, that would have been a mistake. As you can see, they do get bonus damage against ranged, but they won't get bonus on bonus. Good lord. Well, anyway, as we're breaking down the philosophies of what is truly a ranged unit and what is not, it looks like SES's redeeming factor on the north side did get discovered. And this is where map control is just completely lost for SES. He can't even play for Imperial at this stage. It's just too big of an investment. Instead, BC's the one going for it. BC, who's almost pop-capped and is able to naturally swing towards this due to all the passive unit generation that saved him so much money. It's just absurd to think just how much over this many minutes in the game he's freely built. You know, if we equate a free unit production, so like these are taking a minute, but Janissaries are more pricey, right? Let's stick the average at this stage that he got a free unit for, say, 100 resources as the split average, or 110 resources, probably the more accurate split average, every minute, with 4 military schools active. So he's getting 440, let's say around 400 passive unit production, 400 resources worth passive unit production every minute. Over this course of the game, so let's say he's been getting that for about at least 25 minutes. That's actually insane. That ends up being 10,000 resources worth of free units. Now, that's a rough estimate. It's maybe a little bit lower than that. I'd say he's had like 8,000 passive resources worth of units. That's absurd. When you put it in the frame like that, you realize what I meant earlier, that when you're playing against the Ottomans, you kind of have to find a way of either reaching an absurdly late stage in the game or killing them very early on. Because their mid-game is just naturally powerful. When you're around the 30-minute mark, especially as an HRE player who hasn't even aged up into Imperial, you're losing the game. He looks like he's losing this one. Mango shots coming out, heavy damage on the Janissary at least, so we'll take a good fight here. Beastie not showing the respect that is due to the Mangonels. He will pay a price here. But at the end of the day, what's the cost elsewhere? Tech up is complete. Beastie now up in Imperial Age. He did go up with the Istanbul Observatory. It's an interesting one. Actually, I haven't seen this one in play yet. You can see it improves the influence that all your blacksmiths and universities get. What influence am I talking about? The blacksmith influence that you've been seeing on these military schools. So the alternative is you go for the C4, which is just a giant keep that buffs up traders moving by. This, though, is absurd. That this juices the passive production rate on these structures. So now Janissaries are getting pushed even quicker than before. And on top of that, you save a little bit of wood investing into the university. You can just quickly rush into your first techs. Pretty cool play, actually. Pretty cool building. Even after all that, like, just looking at the army value situation still, it's almost like it just didn't happen to Beastie that he lost half of his army on the north side. It's quite funny to see Beastie play a civ like this in a different way. Like, I'd say I'm kind of used to seeing Beastie rush 200 pop cap and then just always staying at 200 pop cap and zerging you with cheap units. He's kind of got a different approach here, though. Janissary is definitely a more premium option, Knights as well, but it's all for free. So it makes sense. Like, long term, he wins fights. The issue is if his opponent's able to force back-to-back fights, that's when you start to lose, is because you just don't have that production rate. Because instead of paying for it, you're paying with time, which of course is more expensive and it takes longer. But because SAS is never in a position to leverage his superior production rates and gathering rates, because he's never actually there, BC gets away with this slower approach to AoE. You see my issue with this, right? Like, it's just running around your own base. And the problem with this is BC will lose the Knights eventually. By the time he does, he's passively replaced them. Look at his pop cap now. He's still ahead of SAS. He shuts down some of the eco. He makes sure there's no sort of tech up going on. That's the other detail here, by the way. The reason BC came in this deep, he's looking for a tech up attempt. He won't find it because SAS is still forced to double down. And SAS can never dream about going Imperial until he's pop capped. And by doing these type of raids, you continue to keep him away from that pop cap as well. SAS just discovered the bad news. There's barely anywhere to actually breach now. Long wall pretty much complete for Beastie, so no exposure point for him. Means he'll be able to just divert all attention towards aggression. And SAS desperately tries to keep this open, but for what? Beastie now just sidestepping into those great bombards. Pretty effective unit up against these clump type formations. It's actually kind of awkward for the HRE at this stage of the game. Typically HRE like these kind of clump battles because, well, in this game SAS went for Mangonels, and then on top of that, Langstack. Langstack is always the reason you want these saturation to battles, because everyone should just clash and you've got AoE splash, you win. Bombard switched the script. The splash damage on this unit will just break you apart. And you're talking about throwing in glass cannon units. If the Langsneck gets sighted out by these great bombards, insta-gone. And after that, the melee mosh pit just gets worse and worse for you. SAS now on the move. Walls aren't completely complete, but they are complete enough to be safe here. A little bit of deletion coming out from BC as he wants to free up some pop cap space. Oh, he's stuck in the midfield. It's just problematic now for SAS because he needs to basically get trebuchets or he's not getting in. Now, he could try to imp up, and it looks like that is his intent. He's going up now with the Palace of Swabia. But this might just be a go point for Beastie. You can see he's now prepping all the archery ranges, stables, everything he needs to just ensure that if his army goes down, he can insta-replace. And the cool thing is he's now arrived at a stage that, although he hasn't got these great gathering rates like the HRE, he's got a healthy villager lead. He's built all these passive units for free, and it means that he's built surplus in reserve to reach that beastie phase we were talking about, where he just infinitely throws crap at the enemy. And I think it's time for him to start doing that. SAS, of course, is going to try and buy a little bit more time. Now that he's teched up, he needs to wait for his upgrades to kick on in. I'm looking at the tech situation. BC has a clear lead in pretty much everything here, right? It's especially wiring around the ranged element. In the fight. Clash in the center. There's a raid on the south side, so a few troops here not in play for SES. Great bombards, good lord. And you notice he just wants the front line there because SES can't fight against this. That damage is absurd. Who decided it was a good idea to charge the cannon down the center? I feel like I'm watching the 8th episode of Star Wars here. They're just dead. I mean, that's just going to be an army wipe. SES. Cheap spears are just not going to cut deep enough here. A front line of archers and janissaries stand their ground. Mangonel's finally in play. Where were they this whole time? Doesn't matter, they're not here anymore. The great bombards have fixated their sights upon him. So Mango's now to play. No counter to the front line of Beastie that is technically a back line. The backbone of SAS's army is entirely gone. God, these things are insane. What a unit. Culverin at least sniped one of them out, but it's just, it feels too little too late now. And remember, Janissaries can repair. So you just see Beastie instantly go, oh yeah, I don't need villagers out here. I can make these great bombards last longer. And SES, man, this game, he had some good ideas around the Burgrave. I just feel like he ran out of steam. This was someone buying a 4x4 that chugs a lot of gasoline just before the petrol prices went up worldwide, and then realizing the great error they had made. Because if he just had farms set up, if he had a little bit more eco, if he wasn't exposed and BC wasn't able to raid in with these archers and punish that, you could see the men-at-arms push reaching 40, 50, diving the base and not stopping. But it never reached that critical point. And Beastie, to his credit, sticking hard on the archers, sticking to, not his guns yet, which will come around later, he was able to hold. And the MAA dive was not able to stagnate the economy. SAS, I think he realized when he attempted to dive what the issue was. Burgrave works against civs where you dive them and every piece of eco goes idle. Even if you do that against the Ottomans, it's not good enough. If you can not kill off the military schools, the production continues. And I think that was the pressure that SAS felt. He knew he was on the clock. It was either going to work fast or it was going to be a very slow death. And Beastie, once you get past that uncomfortable phase, you notice what happened. He applies pressure on the HRE side of the map. He walls himself in. He prevents any raids, and he passively generates these premium armies. Passive generation against a civ that is economically not as powerful as it once was. Doesn't have the passive gold it once did. Doesn't have the ability to go into Langsneck to maybe clean up these mass armies. Doesn't have the passive gold to get into Mangonels to clean up these vast armies. Instead, the only one being cleaned up here is SES. And Beastie showing you exactly why the Ottomans can be brutal around this time span. Later on in the game, when economy is fully set up, when you're up against an Abbasid player at 45, 50 minutes, Ottomans will probably struggle. But in this window, between, let's say, 25, 40 minutes, Ottomans are at their most powerful. And Beastie just gave you a prime presentation of why. SES doesn't give up, I'll give him that. But even if these mangoes here, it just wouldn't be good enough. Probably the final fight on us. HRE, I don't know. I feel like there's ways in which they can maybe deal with the Ottomans. I think SES kind of had half the picture right about trying to be fast and aggressive, but the other half just didn't come together. Just got to keep painting. But Beastie, Ottoman's OP, please nerf, is what I can already hear it come from everyone. Definitely a strong Civ when optimized correctly, and you can't take anything away from Beastie. He definitely optimized for this one.